Well, hello, world. Welcome to Coffee Time again. I am Dale, your host. This is where we expose the truth. And today we're going to expose the truth with Matthew Friedman. He's at the Mekong Delta Club. Uh, he recently moved to Singapore, I believe.
I'm actually in Hong Kong now.
Hong Kong now. Okay. He moves
Yes,
around a
yes.
little bit. I can't keep up with him. Uh, this is a little bit different for me. It's an evening show, so let's get going and introduce Matt to you and enjoy the show. Matt, it's all yours.
Hello, well, my name is Matt Friedman. I am a person who's been addressing the issue of human trafficking and modern slavery for the past 35 years. I have been in Asia that entire time. Much of my work has been in Nepal, Bangladesh, Thailand, and now I'm living in Hong Kong. Basically, what I do is help companies now to understand the issue of human trafficking and what they need to do in order to address it. So, for example, I work with banks to help them to make sure that they don't do investments that are going to contribute to that. I work with factories to ensure that they, within their supply chains, don't have any issues or problems that are like sweatshops. And I work with the hospitality industry to ensure that sex trafficking doesn't take place. So I've done this all over the world. I've done it for a long time, and I do these podcasts in order to raise awareness about the particular topic that I'm focusing on.
Well, I think that that is better than education that we talked about before I turned on the camera because human trafficking is a multi-billion dollar a year industry.
$236 billion to be exact. This is the
Okay.
latest calculation. In fact, they say that that's an underestimate and that it's actually much higher.
Yeah.
And the interesting part is the amount of money that's available to fight this is 400 million, which is 0.13%. So the
Yeah.
bad guys got a lot of money. Good guys have very little money to address this.
So what can we do to raise the income levels? Not the income
Uh,
levels, but raise money to get more money into fighting human trafficking.
Well, I mean, I think it's really important for people to understand the extent to which this problem exists. There's an estimated 50 million people in what's called human trafficking or modern slavery. The United States uses the term human trafficking because we have a definition for that. The rest of the world calls it modern slavery. Out of that, about 23 million would be of forced marriages, where people are forced into a marriage not to, have a consensual, life together, but to have that person work within the family as almost a slave.
Yes.
Out of the remaining 27 million would be forced labor and sex trafficking, which is about 6.3 million women and girls in forced prostitution around the world. And in fact, that's how I got into this. Years ago, I was living and working in Nepal, and I was finding 12, 13-year-old girls who were HIV positive, didn't know what was going on. I was a public health officer and we were basically treating them. So went to go interview them and heard how many of them were befriended by somebody in their village who wanted to marry them. Once they got married, they said, okay, well, I'm going to take your daughter to Kathmandu to the family. But instead of doing that, they took them to Mumbai, India, and sold them to the brothels.
Yeah.
And so we were hearing this story over and over again, but I didn't understand the evil of it until I actually went to those brothels. I was invited by the Indian government to do public health checks. I had a officer with me, went into one of the brothels, and there was an 11-year-old trafficking victim. She saw this Caucasian guy, literally ran up, wrapped herself around me, and said, "Save me, save me. They're doing terrible things to me." I looked down at this child who was hysterically crying. I turned to the police officer and said, "I need to get this girl out of here." He said, "We can't do that." So what are you talking about? You're a police officer. He said, "If we try to both leave with her, we'll both be killed." To make a long story short, we left. We came back with a lot more police, but of course she was gone. Everyone once in a while in life, God tests us. That was my big test. After that, I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. And I did what a lot of activists eventually do, surrender to the fact that now that I've been exposed to this, this is what I'm going to do with my life. And 35 years later, here I am talking to you.
Well, I think it's a marvelous thing that you're doing. I've heard some nasty things that it takes 7 times after you rescue a girl before she stops going back, escaping.
Uh,
7
say
strings
that
in
again.
Sacramento.
Say that again. I'm sorry, I missed the point.
That when you rescue a girl, she'll escape and go back to her abuse 7 times on average before she gets saved.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard that. Yeah, actually, what often happens with these young women and the girls is that they are groomed by the traffickers to develop a sense of dependency.
Hmm.
And so let's say that you have a 14-year-old girl in the Midwest and she's having issues with her family. So
Yeah,
she gets on a bus and she runs away and she ends up in a big city. The pimps and the traffickers are there looking for these girls. And when what they do is they take the girl off and they shower her with love and affection and they bring her to an apartment and they treat her really nice for 3 or 4 weeks until she develops a sense of dependency. And then after that, they groom her in order to get into prostitution as a loyalty thing for them. And
yeah,
so as a result of this process, they have this very kind of weird relationship where, although she's doesn't want to be doing this, she feels like she has to do it. So it's a combination of threats and having no one else to take care of her that results in them, if they're rescued, like you say, go back. They go back several times. I don't know if it's seven. I haven't heard that before, but they continually go back until they get in their mind, I don't want to be doing this. I want out. I want somebody to help us. But the other part of that is many of them don't even trust the institutions or the organizations that would help them because they don't believe that there's people out there that would, take their hand and help them through the
yeah.
process of transitioning back into real life. It takes a lot of trust for that to take place.
I bet it does. I'm sure it does. As a matter of fact, that it takes a long time to get them before they can trust you, not you specifically, but the system to be saved from the horrors of their lives.
Exactly. So, in the United States, it's estimated there's 1 million people in human trafficking slashed modern slavery, and a large percentage of that would be women and girls who are forced into prostitution. A
Hmm.
lot of people think that this happens all over the world, but that's a pretty big number. And if we're really talking about that number of people being in this situation, it's really important to raise awareness so that people understand that this is happening.
Yeah, I bet it is. I don't know. What can we do? What can I do? I mean, I do my podcast and I get people on like you on to talk about it, which gets spread out. I'm not the biggest podcaster in the business out there, but what else can I do?
Well, let me tell a story that will put this into perspective. So, as I indicated, years ago, I was living and working in Nepal. I lived there for 8 years. I was working for the U.S. government as a diplomat. And at that time, as I was hearing about these stories, I desperately wanted to do something to address the issue. So I decided that I was going to write a book. As part of that book process, I went from shelter to shelter to interview the women and the girls. And I went to one shelter, and there was a girl named Geeta. And every time I approached her for an interview, she said, No, 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 I don't want to give my interview. But she sat and listened to all of the other interviews that I did. When I finished and I was leaving, Geeta comes running up and said, I changed my mind. You can have my story. So she sat on one side of the table. The rest of us were on the other side of the table. And over a 3 hour period, she just told the worst story I'd ever heard of rape and torture and disease and murder and betrayal. Honestly, I didn't know, Dale, what to say to her. I was just,
Yeah.
it was so shocking what she said. Finally, I turned to her and I said, Wow, Geeta, you must be so angry at the traffickers for the terrible things that they did to you. She paused and paused. Then she said, No, I'm angry at you and you and you. She pointed at us. She said, Where were you? Said that she every day she'd wake up praying for somebody to come and help her. Nobody came. Said she went to school till she was 12. She knew that everything that was happening outside those brothels was right out in the open. It was all illegal. Nobody was doing anything. She said she wasn't angry at the traffickers. She said that they're just bad people doing what bad people do, bad things. She said she was angry at the good people, at society for allowing a 15-year-old girl to be commercially raped 7,000 times only to eventually get AIDS and she was dying. So she pretty much called us all out. I mean, the number of people like me globally who do this is about 40,000 people. The amount of criminals is about 500,000. We have to follow rules and regulations and so forth. And last year, out of 50 million people globally, with all the United Nations and the NGOs and the governments combined, we helped 133,000 people, which is 0.2%
Oh God,
globally. That's less than 1%.
that's
So she
horrible.
basically understood that, like, People don't know about this, people aren't caring about this. And so, what is it that can be done? One of the most important things is awareness raising. So, what you're doing is important because you're shining a light on this. We're getting in front of people, they're getting a chance to kind of hear about this and learn about this. But once people get a general sense of understanding this, I encourage them to go online and read articles or watch videos and get even more informed. Once you do that, then you can start talking to people. Did you know that this happens in the United States? Did you know what happens to these people when they end up in this situation? If you're on LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever, post articles and so forth. That's really important. Another thing is that a certain percentage of what we're dealing with is associated with the goods that we buy. Certain goods are tainted by modern slavery. If you're going to go and buy a branded item, go onto the website of the company and see if they have a policy related to the topic. If they do, congratulate them and thank them and say, I feel good that I know that you're focusing on this. If they don't, you say, listen, I'd feel better if you had this. Doing it a very positive, respectful way adds value. You can
Yeah,
volunteer. My particular organization has about 150 professional volunteers from all over the world, bankers and marketing people and communication. In fact, my youngest volunteer was 9 years old.
yeah,
She was in the Midwest. She saw me in a documentary. She contacted me and said, "Mr. Friedman, human trafficking is terrible. I want to help." And I basically said, "You're 9 years old." She said, "So what?" I said, "You're 9 years old." She said, "9 year olds and new 16-year-olds give me a chance." So I asked her, "What is it that you think you can do?" She said, "I can find anything on the internet." So I had a couple of second year law Ivy League school people who couldn't find things on the internet, gave it to her 2 days later. I had everything. Because,
yeah,
all of us have God-given gifts. For her,
yeah,
that was her gift. For others, it's public speaking or writing or something else.
yeah.
And lastly, just, donating. There's a lot of organizations that are struggling. They don't have resources.
Mhm.
Skip a couple of meals, do a fundraiser, give the money to one of those local organizations,
Yeah.
and that really helps them to get the work done that's needed in order to address this problem.
Well, I've noticed too, I know about one in Sacramento that works with recovering rescued girls and women. Uh, However, I live in Denver, and I don't
Yes.
know of one organization here in Denver that's doing it. In other words, they're not getting the word out from them, from the organization that helps.
Yeah, I mean, the way to address that, and people ask this question, well, how do I find it? I often, for me, if I was in Denver or if I was in Colorado, I would put Denver human trafficking NGO and see what comes up.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and oftentimes you'll find either a local government service or maybe it's not in Denver, but it's still in Colorado.
Yeah.
But I mean, I happen to work overseas, and
Well,
many of the organizations in Southeast Asia, there's about 750 NGOs that focus on this particular topic, or at least there used to be.
yeah.
Funding has gone way down. COVID really had a devastating impact
Yes, I
on
bet it did.
yeah, and a lot of organizations didn't survive, but they're all over the place, and these are people who really desperately want to do something to help. But
Yeah.
it's not only just sex trafficking; it's forced labor as well. For example, I mean, I'll give an example of like here in Asia, young boys are put on fishing boats, and the fishing boat doesn't go out for a couple of months; it stays out for 4 years. These poor kids work 17, 18 hours a day every day. If they don't, they get beaten, they get tortured. The only food they get is rice and fish, nothing nutritious. They often give them strong drugs to motivate them to work hard, and that sometimes
Yeah.
results in injuries. If they get injured, they just throw them off the side of the boat. At the end of the 4 years, the boat comes in, they don't get anything. I mean, we see these types of things on a regular basis. The other thing that's new in this part of the world is people, professional people out of colleges and universities are being tricked and deceived into going to scam centers. These centers basically are the centers that are scamming North Americans and Asians and Europeans out of their money. They're going after large amounts of money. And so you have about 220,000 young professional people in these prison-like scam centers forced to do this work. And if they don't meet their targets, they get beaten, tortured, tasered, all kinds of terrible things happen. Now that hasn't hit North America yet, but it's moved from Southeast Asia to South Asia. We're seeing in the Middle East, Africa, and Latin America. It's just a matter of time before that same thing happens elsewhere as well.
It most certainly is just a matter of time because when there's money involved, it spreads rather fastly. I was going to ask about that because I know that a lot of hotel workers are forced labor. They have to
So,
work at 8, 9, 10 different jobs,
yeah,
12 hours a day cleaning motel rooms and don't get a nickel.
yeah.
I know
There's
that.
in the United States, people who, for example, who get in under the radar, who have smugglers get them in, they have an indebtedness, and then they're kind of owned by that person, and
Mhm.
that's part of the reason why there are so many trafficking victims in the United States,
Yeah.
because these people can't go to the local authorities, but at the same time. They have to do what these people say, or they will be threatened, or something could happen to their family back in the home country and so forth. So that kind
Yeah.
of leverage is often used.
Well, I understand that because a lot of the migrant workers are not migrant workers, they're forced, they're slaves
Yeah,
working
they end
out
up
in
when
the
they get in
fields.
there, they're owned by somebody else for
Yeah,
sure.
you bet. And I've seen a couple of documentaries on it, but not a whole lot on some of the forced, because a lot of people, when you say human trafficking or forced modern slavery, whatever you want to term you want to use, they think it's just the sex trade.
Yeah, that's
But
correct.
it's
Yeah.
so much larger than that.
Yes. It's only about 25% would be within forced labor, the sex trade. The rest of it is people on fishing boats, sweatshops, domestic helpers that are forced into working
Mhm.
and not getting paid, et cetera, et cetera. So I was in Singapore and I did a talk to a pharmaceutical company, and these are very sophisticated companies. And they said, well, we don't have any vulnerability to human trafficking. We pay our people really well. We know our supply chain. So I asked them, well, how do you get your product from the warehouse to the pharmacies? And they say, well, we hire local transport companies. I asked them, do you ever scrutinize and do your due diligence on that group to see if there's any problems? They said no, but 2 weeks later they called us and said, we did our due diligence and we found out that this is a highly exploitative system. These people are being in human trafficking situations.
Mhm.
Similar thing, I presented to a law firm. They said, we have no vulnerability. I asked them, who cleans your building? They said they didn't know. They looked into it and they came to realize the same type of thing.
Mhm.
So, what my organization does is it educates and informs big businesses to help them to ensure that if there's any kind of vulnerability within their supply chain or within their business, this is how they can address it. So, we give them the tools, the means, the trainings, the consultation in order for that to happen.
That's wonderful. Giving that type of help. It's got to be a very heartbreaking business sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, in the early days, I spent most of my time focusing on addressing sex trafficking. And, when I was in Nepal, I knew about 350 young women who had been trafficked, and every one of them passed away because of AIDS.
Yeah,
So to add insult to injury, not only is their life stolen away and their hopes and dreams and aspirations, but after, being forced to be with 7,000 men, they get AIDS and then they die.
yeah,
So, I mean, and again, we're talking about 6.3 million people in this situation and all over the world. There's no country in the world that doesn't have this issue, including the US.
yeah.
So, I mean, the big issue that I face is a lack of general understanding of the topic. If you don't know about a topic, you're not going to care. If you don't care, you're not going to do anything. And
Right.
so, again, this is the reason why we try to get in front of podcasters to help amplify the message that we, the world, need to care about these people, because unless we collectively, as a community, come together to support this, the limited number of people that do this aren't going to have much of an impact.
No, they're not. And I'm very curious. How do they get? I know how they get picked up. The girls or the men or the
Yeah.
boys get picked up. I know how that happens. They come into the U.S. and they're alone and they're scared and they're frightened, and this guy befriends them. Next thing you know, they're enslaved. So I understand that, and was a drug and alcohol counselor for
Yes.
24 years. So I learned
Yes.
therapeutic skills.
Yes. Yes.
How can I use those?
Well, I mean, I think so. I did a presentation tour across North America. This was my wife and I spent 70 consecutive days. We went from Vancouver down to the lower part of California, then over to Texas, up to Chicago, down to Florida, and then up to New York. And during that, we got in front of all different types of groups, the general public, corporations, uh, government workers, and so forth. And what was quite interesting after having done 134 presentations is a number of people would come up and say, I was at that train station, or I was at that mall, or I was at that shopping center, and I saw something that didn't seem right. It didn't look like this relationship between that man and that girl was something, and as a parent or as a mother, it really bothered me, but I didn't know what to do about it. And so many of these people kind of remembered this, and they would come and tell me these things because as human beings, we see things sometimes, and our gut tells us, well, this doesn't seem right, but we don't know what to do.
Right.
So one of the things that's really important is to help people to understand that there's a hotline that's in the United States. It's run by an organization called Polaris, and this particular hotline is the national hotline. And so if you see something, you can just call them. Or if you feel like it's more of an emergency, you can just call the local police and say, listen, I don't know if this is anything, but I'm sitting here in this mall and there's this thing going on over here, and I think that there's a problem. And I'll tell you a story about that. So I was in the United States and I did a presentation in Washington, D.C. at the American Banking Association. And when I finished, this guy comes up and says, I want to tell you a story. And so I said, okay, that's fine. That happens as a public speaker. And so he said, I was taking my wife and teenage daughter from one part of the United States to the other. And we were driving and we got to the halfway point, pulled into a motel. I got my wife and daughter settled, and then I was going out for food. But I saw this 14-year-old girl being dragged into this room, and it looked like it had something to do with prostitution. And I have a teenage daughter, and it really bothered me. So I went to the manager to say, I think there's a problem here. He then went back to his room and he's peeking out of the curtains to see if anything will happen. Sure enough, 15 minutes later, the police come. 15 minutes after that, this guy is being taken out in handcuffs. The girl is being taken away in an unmarked car, presumably to a shelter. And he said, I wanted to tell you that because that was like a milestone in my life. I really thought that that was an amazing thing that I was able to do. People see these kind of things.
Mhm.
People have the potential to be able to address it. Had he not gone to that office and reported it, who knows what would have happened to that girl.
Right.
And maybe as a result of him doing that, it took her in a direction where her life was much better, and she maybe got back with her parents. Who knows what happened? But certainly the potential for that better outcome happened as a result of a person knowing about the issue, seeing something and reporting it, and then using that as a basis of being part of the eyes and the ears that are needed in order to find these things in the world that we are in.
Yeah. If you see it, talk about it.
Exactly.
Just,
Exactly. But if you don't know what to look for, then it's part of the problem. And so what you're looking for is a situation where, maybe the girl, it's not always a guy that she's with, but let's say it's a guy in this particular case. They don't look like they belong together. She looks very uncomfortable. You know what it's like with a parent and a child. You can tell that they belong together. If she looks distant, if she looks nervous, if she's dressed inappropriately for her age, if there seems to be tension between them, if it looks as if this person is watching out while they're with this particular individual, as if to make sure that nobody sees that this relationship isn't right. Those are all the red flags that we should be looking at in order to determine whether there's a potential problem.
mhm. We got to look for the red flags. We got to get the word out of what the red flags are.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I mean, and there are lots of websites that will identify what these warning signs are. You can go directly onto the Polaris website. In within Colorado, I'm sure you have organizations that have their own list. But watching a couple of videos and being informed, and as a parent, also talk to your child. What's
Mhm.
happening now is young teenage girls are being groomed online.
Yeah.
So
Oh
what they're
God,
looking
yes.
for is, a 14-year-old who feels like she's uncomfortable with herself and maybe doesn't have a lot of friends, but she goes on a chat.
Yeah.
And some of the people she thinks she's dealing with are like 55-year-old guys instead of what she thinks is a 16-year-old boy.
Yeah.
And basically, he's grooming her to eventually get her to meet him in a particular location. And sometimes they use a 16-year-old boy as kind of an avatar. And then what they'll do is, in some cases, is she'll have a Coke at a cafe. He'll put a roofie in there, and then she'll wake up in a motel room, naked and with uncompromised photos. And then they'll use it as a basis to say, now you have to basically sleep with people when we say so. If you don't, then we're going to send this to your parents and to your school and to all your friends on your Facebook, et cetera, et cetera. These are the kind
Yeah.
of things that happen in the United States and all over the world.
Oh, it happens. You hear about it all the time. This girl's been in the news.
Yes. So that type of exploitation, you need to talk to your kids about it. It's one of those perhaps uncomfortable topics, but it's an important topic to have.
Yeah. Well, my kids are all grown now, I'm afraid to say,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
they've got kids.
Yeah.
And I've got 12 grandchildren. Nine of them are daughters.
I see. Yeah. Well, I mean, the interesting thing is about this particular topic, parents who have daughters, especially teenage daughters, when they hear about what's happening with all these women and girls, it becomes very personal for them because
Mhm.
they look at their own daughter and they say, well, maybe my daughter's going to be okay, but, I love my daughter so much. And gee, all these other daughters that are out there don't have somebody to help them and they end up in these terrible circumstances. So the empathy and the compassion is very strong among those people.
Yes. When I publish this, I'm gonna put some special things in with it to get more people interested in listening to it. I'll
Well,
advertise.
I'm happy to give you some links of organizations, and that basically you can put in the area where you have the podcast because it's really important, not
Show
just to learn
notes.
about this, but to have this be a stepping stone for
Yeah.
continuing education on the topic.
Now, the best way to do that would be to email me,
Yeah, I can go ahead and do that.
and I'll give it to you. I'll put it in the chat, or do you want me to just mail it to you through podcast? Pod match.
I'm not using Podmatch now. I had a donor that was helping out with that
Oh, that's right.
process. Yeah, and he we're going to take the summer off.
Yeah.
I just have too much other stuff that's happening at this
Okay.
time.
Well, I'll send you my email. Uh,
Yeah.
how am I going to do this? Where's chat? Right there.
No, I think I have your email, don't I?
Oh, if
I
you
think
have it, then great. It's
yeah,
host at coffee-time-again.
yeah,
.com.
it's admin and there's and the host. I have that,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Okay. As long as you got it, send me that. This is the easiest way to do this. And now when I do my show notes, I include it in my show notes.
Sounds great.
And I get some for Colorado specifically, but I've got listeners all over the world. I got them in Japan, and I've even got one in Russia.
Yeah, very good.
So we need more than just me, though.
Yeah, exactly, for sure.
And how do I get more people? I mean, I put the podcast out as quick as I can. It'll
Yeah.
take me about a week, 10 days to get it done. Uh,
Okay.
I want to get involved in some of these ones in Denver. I want to try to see what I can do.
Yeah, you can also give my email address for anyone who wants to learn more about what it is that I do and how I
Okay.
do it. Yeah, happy to have that in there. And I'll say that in an email that I send off to you.
All right. That'd be fantastic, uh, Matthew. Uh, what advice do you have for parents?
I think it's the thing is that this world is changing so quickly. There are so many things that are happening in this world related to technology, related to social media, related to AI, related to scamming, and it's really important for parents to understand that these vulnerabilities are there for their children, but for them as well, or for their parents. For example, there are a lot of elderly people that are being scammed out of their life savings because they trust people and they don't realize that there are these dishonest people, and all they have to do is, especially if the person perhaps has a little bit of dementia, is to say that you have to do something, and if you don't do something, something bad's going to happen. The person gets very scared, follows the instructions, thinking that they're being helped by these individuals, only to have their life savings stolen away. So,
Yeah.
educating and informing and being aware of the fact that there are these bad things that are out there is an essential part of the day-to-day kind of living experience here in this
Mm.
world at this particular time.
Yeah, because I live in an assisted living facility, independent. That's where I'm at right now is independent. But I may give a talk to the activities people, see if I can't give a little talk to the people that are in here.
I think that would be a great thing. And what you demonstrate by saying that is, for us to be able to address the issues of our time, of which this is one of the, expecting that the non-government organizations and the governments and the United Nations are going to address that is an unreasonable expectation. There's not enough of those people. So we, as citizens of the world, need to identify what our topics are and then to find a way of getting involved. So
Yeah,
for me, it happens to be human trafficking. My sister, she cares about animals. My brother, he cares about the environment. Figure out what cause is yours and then find local organizations to work with, or just create awareness through Facebook or social media or any of these other things.
yeah,
And that's a contribution. If 1 million people did that, that would really add up,
it
because
would.
again, there's 50 million people in modern slavery, and last year the world helped 0.2%.
Yeah, that is
But
just
it's the same with poverty and girls' education and bullying and drug abuse and all of those other topics. We as human beings have to get involved.
we do. We have to stay involved. We can't
Exactly.
just say, "Well, I'm going to help," and 2 or 3 months down the road, you're gone.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. So I wrote a book called Be the Hero, Be the Change. And as
Mhm.
part of that process, I make the point that a lot of us go through life, maybe we like our life and our jobs and everything, but there's a certain emptiness or a lack of purpose there.
Yeah,
And we don't know exactly how to address it. And part of it is that in our world, we just take, 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 but we don't give anything back. And so there's this imbalance. If you
right.
start getting involved, then that balance is there, and all of a sudden you start feeling good about yourself.
Yeah,
Your life has that wholesome, holistic aspect where you're not only addressing the needs of your family and yourself, but you're also giving something back. And if we had more people moving in the direction of accepting that type of mentality and understanding, imagine where the world would be. It'd be a much
mhm.
better place.
I totally agree with you, Wayne. I not Wayne, you're Matthew. Wayne was this morning. I get confused
Yeah.
sometimes.
No, no problem.
Sorry about that, Matthew. What do you have for teens? What can you tell a teen?
Well, I think the teens need to understand that unless you know somebody personally, physically, you've had contact with them, anyone that's online, you can't trust necessarily that they are who they say they are. And I hate to say that. That breaks my heart when I say that, but it's the reality of the situation.
Yeah.
Because you can even now with AI adjust a person's voice, you can adjust what their photo looks like, you can do whatever it is that you want. And so if a person wants to deceive you out of something, and you are trusting by nature, we almost have to go into social media with a certain distrust. And until you really know a person, you've had a conversation, and again, if you've seen them in person, be wary.
Yeah.
And that's the message that and when we were growing up, we didn't have to worry about any of those things.
No, we
We
didn't
didn't
have
have cell
computer.
phones, we didn't have computers, we didn't have iPads, we didn't have social media. You know, to get to know somebody, you got on the phone and you talked to them, or
Yeah.
you met them, someplace and you had a conversation. Now the world is so much. I'm so glad that I'm not a teenager at this particular time.
Yeah,
It's
me too.
confusing, and your identity is based on not direct contact with people, but likes and Facebook page submissions and everything.
Yeah.
And it's just a very complicated world that we're living in right now.
It is very complicated and it's getting worse with AI at the forefront now, and AI is getting more and more sophisticated every day.
Absolutely. I'm old enough that like even calculators didn't exist and then they did. And so the big question within the schools is, do we allow people to use calculators? And they said, no, learn the long math and then certain occasions you can do it. Now the same problem happens with AI where all the answers are right there. And so, young people don't have to go and research things because they all they have to do is go on ChatGPT or something and it's right
Yeah,
there. And it affects the way people think about things because you don't have to have as much analysis, you don't have to have as much thought when this mechanism does it for you. So,
yes,
anyways, it'll be interesting to see what impact this has on jobs because you don't need as many people to do things if the AI does it so much more efficiently. So you may have
yeah,
a lot of educated people. And where it comes home to me is that in this part of the world, in Asia, part of the reason why people end up in these scam centers is they got their education, but they can't find a job. And so they end up taking these opportunities in other countries only to find themselves in these scam centers.
yeah. It My son has a couple of master's degrees and bachelor's in aerospace engineering.
Yes.
And now, since with everything that's going on, he's working with my oldest boy is working with uh, Commerce Department in the patent and trademark office because he can't find a
Yeah.
job building rocket ships.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, anyways, I think we're going to see more and more of that. And again, with people don't have opportunities, then they start getting desperate, and that desperation results sometimes in them accepting opportunities that can be exploitative.
Mm,
Not always to the extent of it being human trafficking, but
no.
I mean, the person spent a lot of time and effort to get to the point where they got that degree, only not to have that degree. So, you
Mm,
know, it's a real problem.
it is a real problem, and I will be doing my. I got 3 months off, so I'm going to spend most of my time writing my book, obviously, but I'll also spend time checking out all these links you send me and seeing if there's what's close to here where I live, and see what I can do to help
Sounds great. Well, if there's
volunteer.
anything that I can do to help, if anyone has any questions, they can just reach out to me directly. I'll
Yeah,
I'll
I
be
get
sure
your
to
email up to. No,
yeah.
you don't have a work podcast. What? I don't think I have you. I must have your email because I sent you the link.
Yeah, you did. Yep.
I got it somewhere. I just have to remember where I put it.
Yeah. I'll send it again.
All right. This has been we still got lots of time. So when did you realize something was wrong with the existing education system besides it screwed up?
Well, actually in this part of the world, the education system is pretty sophisticated in a certain number of countries. For example, in China, kids are given iPads in the kindergarten, and they're using all kinds of technology in order to kind of be advanced in what's happening in the cutting edge aspects of the world. Um, I think people feel like in the United States that it's some of the best education in the world, but according to the statistics, it's like 25 on the global list. And
Yeah.
so, kind of looking at what's happening at other locations and identifying where education has to be now in order to accommodate what the world is a really important process.
Yeah, I personally believe that one of the worst things with dealing with education is the Department of Education.
Yeah, I don't know much about it. I've lived overseas for
Yeah,
35
well,
years.
it,
I hear that that's an issue, but for me, I don't know
I don't
anything about
know.
that, I'm
Well,
afraid.
it is
Yeah,
because they've taken the running of schools away from the locals, away from the
yeah,
local school board and put it at the national level, which has no content, can't think of the word I want to use, no idea what's going on in, say, Denver, Colorado.
yeah, yeah,
They don't know.
yeah,
They could care
yeah,
less. The
yeah,
other
yeah.
government thing that they got going. Need to get rid of that and put the government education system back in charge of the local people.
Yes.
to go
I
through
think that
school
the
for.
issue, part of the issue, Dale, is just making sure you have the resources in order to address that. So,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, investing in our young people is the way that we're going to be able to keep up with what the world needs. And
Mhm.
uh, I can't speak to the Department of Education, but I can say this is that there has to be a regular assessment of kind of where the world is going, let's say in the United States, and what needs to be done. And perhaps at the state level, there has to be adjustments made in order to ensure that the education and the curriculum and the teaching skills and so forth accommodate that
Mhm.
change.
Yeah.
And a lot of countries around the world don't understand that. But what's again so interesting in this part of the world, within Vietnam and Thailand and Singapore and Malaysia, is they are adjusting the way they approach their education to accommodate these changes that are happening in the world.
Oh, okay. Well, at least somebody's working on it.
Yeah,
Maybe.
and I think you'll probably see that. I'm just hoping that like I'm an American, and obviously I care about my country. That we have that thoughtful process in mind, and we take into consideration what the changes are. And in the
Right.
absence of that happening, I think we get left behind.
Yeah, I think we will too, because we're 25th in the world. There's 163 countries, and we're 25th. That's not good.
Yeah, yeah, not good. Yeah. So, and I mean, there's a lot of need for all kinds of other things to be done in education where, as we're talking about, the vulnerability for sex trafficking or being exploited or scamming and so forth. I don't know if that's included in the educational system, but it's a really important topic that has to be covered.
No, it's
And if
not.
it's not, then and if parents don't know about it and faith-based groups don't know about it, then where do they get their education? They get it from a real life experience where perhaps they get exploited and then they're in big trouble. How do they get out of that?
Yeah. I found they took a lot of things out of the school system and need to put back in, like job skills. I had typing in class in high school.
Yeah.
Gym we need to put back in. We need to put sports back in. We need to put a lot of educational things back into the system that we've taken out. And we've taken
Yeah, I mean, I
sports
think
out. Home economics is one of sport, shop,
yeah,
stuff like that. They've taken out. We need to put them back in.
yeah. I had all of those things.
Yeah.
Sports teaches you leadership, teamwork, how to get along with people, how to
Hmm.
collaborate. Shop teaches you basic skills. I was able to, for years, work on my own car
Yeah.
because I went to shop and I learned how to do that. And even wood shop and metal shop, I learned how to use my hands and to make things, and that's an important process.
Yeah. I learned how to weld.
Yeah,
In a small little town that I was in, we still had all that stuff.
yeah, yeah,
So
indeed. Yeah,
we need to put
good.
all that stuff back in, and we're not going to do it as long as government, as long as the feds are running the education system.
Yeah,
Because I hear a lot of things around. They're talking about putting this back in and that back in. However, they
yeah,
can't because the feds control it so tightly they can't do it yet.
yeah. I understand that. Yeah, I understand that for sure.
Yeah, it's rough. And when did you realize something was wrong with our education system?
When did I realize it? Well, I mean,
Yeah,
I think the education system that I grew up in needed a lot of work as well.
yeah,
A lot of what happens in the educational system is you learn things and you memorize things, and then you have to like present it back. But what education really should do is to help you to problem solve and to
right.
analyze and to think and to apply. And so finding ways of ensuring that those kind of activities take place is an essential part of the process. You have to experiment. So, I mean, for example, I mean, in my world, when I worked for the United Nations, and I did that for 6 years, we would often have a series of workshops in order to develop some type of a plan of action.
Yeah,
And in those workshops, you often had people presenting, 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 presenting. And as human beings, we can internalize and accept a certain amount of information, then our mind begins to wander. I mean,
Yeah,
you get tired of it. And so rather than having presentations resulting in working groups, we would just get teams of people together and give them an assignment to solve and then send them off in a particular direction. And so they would analyze and debate and discuss and work as a team and then come back and then present it back. So
yeah,
that type of approach allows for young people to really apply what their knowledge is to what needs to be done in order to address it. And that stimulates a thinking process that allows for more problem solving to take place.
yeah. There's a quote going around that I read that I use frequently is the oh, now I forgot it. Give me a second. Oh, the, the way the education is working in today's world, while you're in school, what are the future leaders of our country?
Yes.
It's something that's not exact. Can't remember exactly how it goes. I should have had it out here. But it basically says the curriculum and the education system trains our leaders for tomorrow, and they were doing a very poor job of it.
Yeah, I mean, education is your destiny in a sense. If you don't have the basic knowledge to be able to again problem solve or think about how to move forward with things, how do you engage with whatever job that you have and so forth. So.
Right.
I guess the point I'm making is rather than just thinking that all of the answers to how to be educating in the United States is to look beyond that to other countries to see what they're doing and then to take the best of what's out there and then apply it to the educational system.
Yeah,
And
that's a great idea.
states can be working with each other on that. The
Yeah,
states that are a little bit further can be mentoring the states that need additional work. There could be sharing of curriculums and best practices and what works and what doesn't work. And as a result of that process, they'll perhaps get to a point where everybody is at the same level.
yeah,
Um, but investing in our children is the thing that is going to result in us achieving wherever we need to be in this changing day and time.
yeah. It's changing too fast for an old man like me.
Well, I'm glad that again that it's not happening when I'm young.
Yeah,
I'm concerned about my own kids and their kids
yeah.
because the world that we see today and the world that we're going to have even 10 years from now or even 5 years from now is going to be much different.
You're gonna be totally different. What's the
Uh,
difference between the mental and emotional pillow? I don't understand that one.
uh, what? Say that again?
What is the difference between the mental and emotional pillow?
Don't know what that is. Sorry.
What is the difference between the mental and emotional pillow? Or like
Pillow?
from Dennis, what is the spiritual pillow?
Um, I don't know. I don't know how to
Oh,
answer that one.
we
I'm
ain't gonna
sorry.
worry. We won't worry about it. Uh, what's the one thing that you think we need to know?
I think we need to know ourselves. I think a lot of people basically determine who they are based on what other people think they are, instead of us getting to know ourselves. So, I mean, like for example, I had spent much of my life worrying about what people thought about me, and then I would gauge my behavior and my emotions on, whether or not, the fluctuation that goes along with that particular
Mhm.
process. I think getting to know ourselves, our strengths, our weaknesses, what we're good at, what we're not good at, accepting ourselves for ourselves, who we are, all of those things I think are an important part of what we need to know as human beings.
We get to know ourselves, which I understand that, and I understand part of the process of understanding it. But once we know ourselves, how does that help us?
Well, to feel comfortable with the fact that like we accept the fact that we're not good at everything, and basically what we're able to do with our skills and abilities is to apply them to the type of work that we do and what it is that we want to get out of life and so forth.
Mhm.
I just feel like a lot of people don't. kind of ever really stop to understand who they are internally. And after years and years of being in this world, I've come to realize that there are certain things that I do well, certain things that I don't, and I accept that. And there are going to be people who like me and people who don't like me, and I accept that. So I basically just look at my life as being a journey by which, uh, for over this whole period of time, I have the potential to improve, to get better, to reach my full potential. And the journey allows me to experiment with that. And so if I'm just looking at myself and wanting to improve these things, that's one thing versus whether or not I'm controlled by the what people think about me. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Actually, it makes a lot of sense to me because after many years, I'm an alcoholic, 30, almost 36 years sober. The thing is, I have learned so much about me over the course of the last 36 years of learning about me,
Yes.
therapy and other ways. So I
Yeah.
understand what you're saying there. It's been a tremendous help understanding who I am. What and
Yeah.
I'm okay. I'm okay. Who I am okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, the fact that you're saying that, Dale, you're saying where I am in my life, I'm okay.
Yeah.
So, I feel you feel comfortable with yourself. You come to terms with, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and all the things that have happened in your life. You've accepted where you are and so forth, and you're willing to talk about it. I think part of what I've done in some of the books that I've written is just talked about my failures and the
Hmm.
things that didn't work. And that's an important lesson for people who might experience the same type of mistakes. If you give them a sense of like, this is what I experienced and you can avoid this because I'm going to give you the lesson that I learned from this.
Right.
And so, throughout my entire life, I've had access to mentors. And these are people who I respect and admire, who I can go to and I can share my thoughts and my feelings and my desires. And they help to make sense of these types of things. Some people have that, a lot of people don't. But it's really important as we go through life to have people that we can have conversations with because can also be the individuals that give us an honest kind of determination and description of what they see from the outside about who we are. Because
Right.
if we don't always see who it is that we are, and we have this delusional sense of our self-worth and all of that, we
Yeah.
we make mistakes. Because we assume that everyone feels the same way about us that we do, but there's an inconsistency, and those mentors help to keep us honest in that way.
Yeah. I went out to California, call every now and then and say, "Hey, Steve, I need some help." And
Yeah.
he's really good at helping.
Well, I mean, and those are the type of people that we need to surround ourselves in our life.
Yeah, I've got that one. And I got several here in Denver. So,
Yeah.
we're basically out of time. And I've already
Yeah.
asked the main question I asked the big one. What do we need to know?
I think the thing that we need to know, related again to human trafficking and modern slavery, is that it exists, it's prevalent, it's all around, it has the potential to impact our lives, and we as human beings have to do whatever it is we can to protect ourselves and our family and our community. And
Right.
that happens with awareness raising. So getting to know about this, understanding it, and then communicating this with others is an important part of the process.
Okay. I hear you on that, and I think it's an important point to make that we've got to understand the problem before we can help solve it.
Absolutely.
We have to know it before we can cure it. Or
Absolutely.
anyway, don't go away. I'm just going to turn off the recording, okay?